The meeting is called to order at 5:07 p.m.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 15th, 2026 regular meeting of the Richmond Rent Board. Before we begin, if anyone here tonight needs Spanish interpretation, interpretation devices are available at the interpreter section in front of the chambers. Please let one of our interpreters or a Rent Board staff member know, and they can assist you. Also, as a courtesy to others, please silence your cell phones and any other noise devices. I also have a few reminders regarding public comments. If you would like to address the board, please submit a request to speak card to the assistant clerk before the agenda item is announced. If you wish to speak on an item not listed on the agenda or on the consent calendar, you may do so during public forum. Please refer to the Rent Board meeting agenda for the list of items or to the agenda items open for public comment sheet, which are posted above the table in front of the chambers. Also, this meeting is being interpreted, so we ask that anyone addressing the board please speak clearly and slowly to allow for accurate interpretation. The first item on the agenda is pledge to the flag. Please join me in pledge of allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is the roll call. For the record, please, may I please ask for an audible roll call from Rent Board members and staff? Board Member Espinoza.
Here.
Board Member Height.
Here.
Vice Chair Cantor.
Here.
Executive Director Fred Tran.
Here.
And General Counsel Charles Oshanuga.
Here.
For the record, Board Member Willis and Chair Tipton is absent. The next item on the agenda is Statement of Conflict of Interest. Are there any? Hearing none, the next item on the agenda is Agenda Review. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Are there any changes to the agenda from staff?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Are there any changes to the agenda from board members?
Actually, I think.
Okay, no changes to the agenda.
1 second there to have the conversation. Any changes? Okay. Okay. All right, hearing none, the next item on the agenda is public forum. Tonight, we have one speaker. The speaker shall be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board. When you are called to address the board, state your name and city of residence is optional. Please terminate your address to the board when your time expires. We ask that you keep your comments respectful and appropriate. The speaker is Mr. Cordell Hendler.
So, good evening, Vice Chair Cantor, board members. For the record, I am Cordell Hendler, and I'm a Richmond resident. So, I would ask that if the Rent Board to approve the consent calendar, because I read all of the items and I don't have no problem with it. So, approve the consent calendar. So, that's one. Number two is I was going back to the recordings of the previous meetings, and when we had the special meeting regarding the legal from both parties, it would be great. It would be a refresher course to remind them to slow down for interpretation, because I keep going back to the recording and it's like, okay, they're going too fast. So it would be great if you tell them to slow it down for recording purposes. So it would be helpful for the public to hear. Number three is you are all invited to the mayoral candidates forum on this coming Tuesday on April 21st at the Courtyard Marriott in Richmond. So, and it's only $15 for non-members. That's three. And then the fourth item is coming up, let's see. Oh yes, coming up on April 25th, you are all invited to the NAACP Casino Night. Think about it though. The theme is the Roaring Twenties. And the tickets are only $100 a person. And it's Monopoly money too, so you gotta go in to win it. and there will be refreshments there too. So with that, and oh, the final thing is I'm so proud that the rent board has chose Fred to be the next executive director. He has done an outstanding job to this point. So keep him. Keep him. He's going to keep you all in line. So with that, I'll save my comments for when we get to those items.
Yay.
That was the only speaker. The next item on the agenda is to approve the consent calendar.
Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
That's Board Member Height
I second.
and Board Member Espinoza.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll take a vote. Board Member Espinoza.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes. Board Member Height,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cantor.
Yes.
Motion passes with Board Member Willis absent, Board Member Willis and Chair Tipton absent. Okay. We're now moving to item G1 under study session. Item G1 is to receive a study session update on development and policy options concerning existing exemptions granted pursuant to Regulation 202, including an option of rescinding regulations that grant exemptions to governmentally subsidized units, and a summary report on compliance with Resolution Number 19-01, and direct staff to potentially begin the process of immediately removing the exemption for properties that violated the allowable rent increase limit in accordance with Resolution Number 19-01 upon board approval. There are no speakers on this item.
Great, thank you. We will now hear the staff report.
Good evening, Vice Chair Cantor and members of the Rent Board. I'm Fred Tran, the Executive Director of the Rent Program. And the item before you is Regulation 202 and 204 Study Session Update and the compliance of Resolution 1901. Next slide, please. The statement of issue. During the last regular board meeting on March 18th, staff had presented a study session to the board with historical context, as well as some policy options concerning the possible rescission of Regulation 202. And there were discussions had. Ultimately, the board had requested for staff to move forward with the study session continued to the September regular board meeting, as well as consideration for compliance of 19-01. And so staff is coming back with an update of both of these items. There is no fiscal impact on this item. As mentioned, during the last meeting, this is where we are today with Regulation 202 and 204. It originated on the February 18th meeting when the residents of Monterey Pines had spoke during public commented and basically exhibited delays in maintenance. There were habitability issues, despair. There were utility charges that had not existed in the past that they were being charged. And those comments had continued for 3 subsequent meetings. And the board had requested for staff to conduct some research as well as start a study session process. And with that, consider the possible exemption of Regulation 202 and 204. The critical piece of the study session that we've learned ultimately is these properties. There is more complexity. Ultimately, there's multiple types of subsidies that exist, and this could all exist within one property. One can have all of these subsidies you see before you, but the top three, A, B, and C, are the most predominant. The housing choice voucher, which is tied to a tenant, is with the properties that we've examined, they definitely exist, as well as the C, the low income housing tax credit. A lot of these properties, they'll start out as a LIHTC, but over time, the voucher program will start beginning to either be approved or may have already been established during the development of the properties. So what we have seen is most of these affordable projects, they have layers of subsidy types. And as mentioned, the A, the housing choice voucher, that's tied to the tenant. B, the project-based voucher, that's tied to the unit. And both of these are, they're overseen by the Contra Costa County Housing Authority, and both are funded by HUD. The big difference is the A is the tenant one, which is portable. So a tenant could potentially move from one unit to another and keep their subsidy. B, this is tied specific to the unit, and oftentimes it's actually tied to the unit for multiple years. And so these properties, they could start out with LIHTC and eventually have a percentage of the project-based vouchers for the remaining years. D, Section 202, there's actually only one building that's in the city, and it's a 192 unit that's supportive for housing for the elderly. And there are even a few more. We met with the Richmond Housing Authority, and they have two particular properties, Nystrom and Richmond Village, which are also based out of the Contra Costa County Housing Authority and subsidized by HUD, but administered through the Richmond Housing Authority. So multiple types of properties with multiple subsidies. Ultimately, these properties and the subsidies should be viewed on a per unit basis. Next slide, please. The next item, basically, we did reach out to as many properties as well as tenants as possible. During this, when we did speak to some of the tenants, I actually only had two tenants actually contact me back. One of them, they had some utility charges that were beyond what was expected, and the particular building actually sent a letter stating that their utilities would be credited for tenants that had moved into the building prior to November 1. And so that was established through the entire complex. And another tenant I had reached out to, they did respond, but I was asking them more details as to their particular request, and they had not provided me details of what was necessary for their particular submission within the portal. And finally, other properties that we did speak to, there was a particular property that had multiple forcible detainers that are going through the process, and the latest update we received from PD on Monday was that the owner's able to have 2 evictions conducted every week. So their goal is to have most of those forcible detainers done in the next month or so. And the summary of the ownership groups, we actually met some owners as well as some of their council. And their high-level general questions were they wanted sufficient time to be able to deal and understand the matter that came up before them because they had never heard of these issues before. Secondly, they had wanted to know what had changed from prior years, as well as what exactly would happen if the board plans to rescind, and if the one particular property that caused this issue had some type of plan in place, or if the matter was escalating or moving through the process to be resolved. And ultimately, we were working through that process, and I can provide the actual letter to the board directly if necessary. Compliance report with Resolution 1901. Staff sent 3 separate emails starting on March 20th, then March 24th follow-up, as well as a final April 3rd email to request for rent rolls. And if there were any outstanding payments, the payments were also requested. Overall, staff did receive rent rolls for half of the properties, and the rent rolls that were reviewed, they were, since they did come from different properties with different systems, not all the data that was received was completely consistent. Some was very detailed with percentages of AMI, what type of subsidy, the move-in date, as well as property details. Some just provided a general rent amount from one year to another. So staff did the best possible to do the analysis. And overall, the rents consistently did stay below the 5%. And if they were, it was because of a subsidy that changed the calculation to have that amount increase. And also, some of the tenants' income may have changed, so that would have shifted what was the allowable rent increase for the following year. So staff had been following up with the properties to confirm if those increases were proper. The next 2 items, the payments and enrollment, staff had followed up with any outstandings. Overall, out of the 29 properties, there was only 1 property that did not meet all the 3 requirements. And that 1 property, it's primarily more of a recently built property that just came online, and their information's actually not in the land management database. So as of now, we followed up with code enforcement to get the permit information, as well as following up with the property management. Recommended action is to receive the study session update on development and policy options concerning existing exemptions granted pursuant to Regulation 202, including an option of rescinding regulations that grant exemptions to the governmentally subsidized units, and a summary report on the compliance with Resolution 1901. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from members of the board? Yeah, Board Member Height.
The majority of the units are going to be LIHTC, is that correct?
Correct.
And a whole bunch of them are coming up now, yeah.
Exactly. So, as mentioned, half of the rent rolls were reported. A predominant response we got from the property managers were stating that they were going to provide us the rent rolls after April, because that's when the percentages are released by the Contra Costa County Housing Authority.
So they'll still be under our control.
Correct.
Yeah, the big, bad, beautiful bill, Trump extended LIHTC that we're getting 7%, and now it's up to 11%. So I think there's going to be a lot of motivation, on developers' parts to take advantage of this. And we need to rein them in.
Any questions? Okay, I have a few questions. So going back to the chart of the government, or the list of government subsidy types, so the housing choice voucher and LIHTC built prior to February 1995, both have 2 stars after them indicating that they're subject to rent control provisions. But my understanding of Regulation 202 is that it specifically excludes both of those categories from rent control provisions. Is that not the case?
No, I think the asterisks are indicating that they may be subject, meaning that you can subject them to your provisions if you choose to.
Got it. Okay, so that they're, if Regulation 202 were adjusted or repealed, then those could be subject to rent control provisions versus the project-based voucher, versus like LIHTC built after February 1995, which we know for sure would not be. Okay.
Exactly. And just one last point to that. I think the other significance of this slide is to show that on some properties you have layers of subsidies.
Yeah.
So you'll have one unit with 3 different types of subsidies. And if one of those subsidies cannot be subjected to rent control, even if you remove the exemption from LIHTC, for instance, if it has like a 202 subsidy on it, your removal of the exemption still will not subject it to rent control because there's a federal basis for the exemption.
So they only need to have one, and the existence of any exempt subsidy on a property will result in exemption from the rent control provisions.
Exactly, and that's what we're trying to figure out, how many units have these kind of subsidies that will just automatically exempt you no matter what we do, so that we can present it to you all and you can all have an understanding of the impact of any removal of the exemptions.
Great, thank you. And then this is more of a comment than a question, but on the next slide, there's a statement there that the board plans to rescind regulations on exemptions for all properties due to one property not complying. I just would like to correct the record that that one property not complying is what brought the issue to our attention. And so, similarly to answer the prior question of what has changed from prior years, I think that this issue was not known to the board prior to us being told about Monterey Pines and what was going on there. And it is not the case that this effort that we have directed staff to undertake is in order to remedy specifically what's happening at Monterey Pines, but it's that we were alerted to a broader issue. So I hope that for any property owners that or council that have that question, that if they're listening to this meeting, that answers that question. And then I got a little bit lost in the compliance report, and so I just wanted to confirm, it sounds like we are collecting data, but we haven't yet hit the stage of analyzing the data.
What we've received, we analyzed.
Okay.
There's still some of the properties either asked for an extension to submit their rent rolls, or they stated that they're going to wait till after the April date and them doing their next increase to provide us the latest rent roll that has the most updated
Okay.
with the updated county release percentages.
Yeah. And so of the data that has been analyzed, have any of the properties been found to be out of compliance?
There's only one that's out of compliance, but they just came online, as in they're the ones that we're still gathering information. Even the
Yeah,
code
sorry.
enforcement is.
What I mean is about the acceptable rental
Oh,
increases.
most are in compliance.
Okay, but it's not, are there any that are, is it the case that of all the ones you've looked at, they've all been in compliance with regards to allowable rental increases?
They have,
Okay.
and if not, there may be either a subsidy change or a income change, and we've requested further analysis with the property on that. to
Okay,
confirm.
perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that. Okay. Yeah, Board Member Espinoza.
Donde dice que los, ay, disculpe. Donde dice que los dueños pidieron suficiente tiempo para corregir sus asuntos o cualquier problema, ¿qué tiempo fue lo que pidieron?
When the property owners were requesting that extension, how long of a time frame were they asking for?
They were asking for the April timeframe. So usually April is when the AMI percentages are updated by the county. And so they were requesting for the end of this month, basically, for them to do the rent increase in May.
Entonces, nosotros vamos a tener ya resultados para la próxima reunión.
So will we have the results for our next meeting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as long as they provide it, definitely. And we continue to be in contact with them to request the information.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Board Member Height.
Well, I have a couple questions. The Richmond Redevelopment Agency, how does that, I'm not clear how that is affecting the rent control laws, or how they're affected by it.
Just to clarify, Richmond Housing Authority?
Yeah, the rent restricted, like the View Apartments?
They're the ones that are always gonna, because it's purely just a regulation between the government and the property. So I believe theirs is gonna require further research.
And I don't understand the question. You have to repeat it. Are you referring to
I'm
RAD?
just trying to understand what the Richmond Community Redevelopment Agency,
They're under E.
do they have any exceptions from the rent control?
So I believe that the Richmond Community Redevelopment Agency has been absorbed by Richmond Housing Authority. I don't believe that it exists as a separate entity any longer, so it's part of Richmond Housing Authority. So
And-
everything that we said about Richmond Housing Authority would
Is
apply
what
there.
apply, okay. And do you guys have enough staff to cover all this?
I think that's going to be discussed on an item that's on this agenda.
Okay.
Great. Any further questions? Okay, seeing no further questions, time for public speakers, but
No speakers for this item.
okay, great. So in that case, there's opportunity for discussion, if anyone would like to share any thoughts, or we can entertain a motion. Well, I'll make a motion to move the item, to take the recommended action on the item.
Okay, so that was Vice Chair Cantor making a motion.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair. The item on the agenda isn't entirely succinct because it says to direct us to begin the rescission of all these things. And so I think at this time, we're just asking for you all just to receive the report.
Okay.
And then this is a standing item, so it will be back at our next regularly scheduled board meeting. We might have special meetings where it doesn't appear, but it will appear on the regularly scheduled board meetings.
Okay, and just to receive a report, we don't need to
So no vote.
make a motion, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So, any further discussion before we move on? Okay, then let's move on to the next item.
All right. have one speaker. Okay, thank you. We're moving to item H1 under budget. Item H1 is to receive an update of the fiscal year 2026-27 budget process and request feedback and guidance from the Rent Board to implement assumptions to draft a proposed operating budget. There's one speaker on this item.
Great. I'd like to hear the staff report, but really quick question. Is this a new logo?
Sorry, what
Is
was?
the logo new?
Yeah, that was developed while Nick was still here, but it just never was implemented, and Emily decided to implement it for this month.
Cute. I like it. Great. Well, we will now hear the staff report.
Excellent. Vice Chair Cantor and members of the Richmond Rent Board, I'm Fred Tran, the Executive Director of the Rent Program. And the item before you is the fiscal year 2026-2027 budget update. Statement of issue: in accordance with section 11.100.060I, the ordinance states that on an annual basis, the Rent Board is required to go forward to council by July 1 to have our fees approved. And to get to our approved fees, it's required that we adopt an annual budget. And with that requirement, there is a 10-day required for us to inform the public that there will be a public hearing for that budget to be reviewed by the community. And today, this is actually our first budget item. Our item in the agenda for staffing actually aligns with this, but this is necessary for us to operate on an annual basis. And this today will be providing you the progress of what's been done so far and a timeline, as well as some calendar dates that we need to establish to meet this July 1 deadline. As of now, there is no fiscal impact related to this item. Background: starting in January, the proposed budget was started. Staff did start a unit reconciliation, and we always start with prior year's budget, which had fully covered units at $267 and partially covered units at $151. And getting to the unit reconciliation, essentially, it's been a bit different because we had a new system, a land management system, implemented by the city, which is called IMS. And with that, we had all the data uploaded from our prior Trackit system. With that data upload, we're still doing some reconciliation to confirm that all the data did come through properly. The process has been ongoing for 8 or 9 months now, but at this point, staff had done a preliminary unit reconciliation, and that will be discussed later. This evening, we are requesting to have some guidance on how to proceed forward with our budget. And as mentioned, the agenda I1 for the staffing, the current vacancies is very significant because a third of our 15 head count is actually currently vacant. And when we did initiate the kickoff meeting with the city in late January, we did get guidance provided by the city to have a status quo approach, as in try not to add too many hires for this upcoming year, as well as use the similar non-personal expenditures from past years to start as the basis for our budget. As mentioned, we do currently have a 15 full-time approved positions. With that, currently we have 5 vacancies. The vacancies are an office assistant and an admin trainee, both which were approved in the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. The deputy director role that's vacant, that just recently became vacant. A staff attorney position, which was approved in fiscal year 2025-2026, and 1 rent program service analyst, which was also approved in fiscal year 2025-2026. For the fringe benefits, we're using the same percentage as last year's as an estimate, which is 54% of the total salaries and wages. The city had been negotiating for the last, I'd say since last May possibly, on the memorandum of understanding. The prior ones had expired in June of 2025, and a new memorandum of understanding, or MOUs, were executed with all 3 unions in late December 2025. Some of the highlighted terms prior to this, the COLA, which is set at 5% for all of the bargaining units. Prior years, they were implemented in January. For the new MOU, they're implemented in July, so it's now on a fiscal basis. So July 1 of 2025, 2026, as well as 2027, will have a 5% COLA increase. And the salary schedule, I did a preliminary analysis for most of the bargaining units, and it's per classification and per step or per category. And essentially there was a 5% built in for most of those schedules. The unit count, as mentioned, the IMS land management system, the reconciliation that started, we have an increase in the fully covered units of 75 units. So it's up to 7,612. And for partially covered, there's actually a decrease of 504, and that gets us to 10,372, and that's a net decrease of 429 units. Just that factor alone, having less units, it's going to increase the fees themselves. As of now, with the current assumptions, and actually stepping back a bit, so with the budget, after the unit reconciliation, the next level of analyses and number crunching, it's basically the salaries and then the fringe benefits and then non-personal expenditures. Ultimately, we are trying to project the cost of operating or administering the entire program. And as the salaries and all the other expenditures increase, typically the fees, which is the net of those units and the cost of all those expenditures, will decrease as well. But we always actually start on on the expenditure side to work to what is required to get our fees to recuperate the cost of our program. Essentially, having those increases per the MOUs, as well as some of the decreases in the units. What I've done so far for a preliminary budget is as status quo, as the city had given us guidance for. I didn't add any roles to the budget, and I left the deputy director role vacant. And with that, the net effect of those three assumptions, the fees will increase $10 for fully covered to $277, and it will increase $8 for the partially covered to $159. And this is just a preliminary. As mentioned, status quo for all the other non-expenditures or non-personnel expenditures. So for administrative, copy, the interpretations, the legal, as in the outside legal services that we have contractors with. And ultimately, this is the net effect. But as mentioned, we'll request your guidance as to how to proceed with some of the staffing. This is the actual calculation with the estimated projections, and this is just a draft of the proposed. Fringe percentage, it shows 53, but it's actually closer to 54%. And most of the other expenditures, I was trying to keep as consistent as prior years to try to keep the fees as consistent as prior years. And finally, this is actually our most critical part of the budget as well, is the time frame, because essentially the prior three meetings were heavily focused on Regulation 202. So we do have a little bit of catch up to do with the scheduling of the budget process. As mentioned, we do need to have it adopted by the July 1 date. And to get there with the 10 days of public, of having that newspaper published, as well as a council item and the board to review a proposed budget and to adopt one. We definitely need to start with today's initial meeting. And we have estimated accelerated dates. So this has been revised. So the next board meeting will be, if possible, April 29th. And we'll need to, with that, we'll need to check on board's availability, staff's availability, as well as facilities, and also city resources, the IT department. But our goal is to have a meeting on April 29th, and if possible, May 13th, and then go to council on June 23rd to have our approved fees added to the master fee schedule with the city for us to begin our invoicing process. And this recommended action is to receive an update of the fiscal year 2026-2027 budget process and request feedback and guidance from the rent board to implement assumptions to draft a proposed operating budget. And this concludes my presentation and available for any questions.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions from members of the board? I have a question about the unit count. So just want to make sure that I'm understanding this chart. I see fiscal year 26 through 27 estimated, and then fiscal year 26 through 28 estimated.
Yeah, that should be 27, sorry. It should be,
27 to 28.
yeah, exactly. I think when I switched the cells over, it automatically pushed an extra year.
Got it. But we're budgeting for 26 to 27 right now.
Correct.
And so this is an estimate, the second column here is an estimate of what will be coming in the following year,
This
27 to 28?
26, 27.
So right now, the first column says 26, 27, and the second column says,
Correct. Yeah, I think
so what is that second column supposed to be?
the second column where the net amount is 17,984, that should be 26, 27. That's what
Okay,
we're
and then what should
budgeting
the
for.
first column be?
25, 26.
Okay, so this is showing an increase
An increase, oh
in
shoot.
total number of covered units. So,
Yeah, it should be a decrease.
so the second column should be 25, 26.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a decrease.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries, just didn't, I was like, wait, those numbers are going up, and also this is a 2-year period that's well in the future.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, great. That answers my question. Any other questions? All right, let's call the public speaker.
So originally, Vice Chair, we had one speaker, but a gentleman asked if he can speak. I told him we'll ask if it's okay with you. So if it's okay with you, you will
Yeah.
allow him to speak. It's up to you.
Board members, that feel okay with you? Yeah, we can take 2 speakers.
Okay. Okay, so we have two speakers, public speakers. The first speaker is Cordell Hindler. You have 4 minutes to address the board.
Great.
Thank you, Clerk Shaw. So, for the record, I am Cordell Henler, and I'm a Richmond resident. So, good evening, Vice Chair Cantor, board members. Thank you, Fred, for that presentation. So, that was kind of going to be I was going to say my comments for when we get to that other item kind of related to this. But as I was looking at this, and I'm like, I do like the whole concept of it. So, I'm thinking to myself, it is a good presentation. So, I'm asking for the board to make some recommendations as we move forward. So having a special meeting on the 29th, I think that would be very reasonable. So with that, I will pass my time to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Arturo Daniel Gonzalez. I couldn't pronounce the last name listed. It wasn't clear. Sorry about that. You have 4 minutes to address the board.
Thank you for the presentation. I was hearing, and a couple questions came to me. So the first one, it is a decrease on the number of units. So 429 units probably not rented or something happening. So how is justified that if it's less units, you're going to charge more money? That's less of a workload for you guys. So I don't think that makes any sense at all. Another question, it is, what's going on with all the ADUs being built? I've heard like there's a lot of construction going on, so that will be another source of income instead of just raising the bills. And the last question I read, and it says that it is less people working, so there will be less of salaries to pay. And finally, here it says that it's just 54% of the income. So what's going on with the other money? those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that was the last speaker. Thank you.
So I wonder, Mr. Tran, if you're willing to talk a little bit about how the fees are calculated and why a decrease in the number of units would result in an increase in fees?
Correct. So that is correct. The fees did increase. The biggest portion is that the salaries had increased from the new MOUs. So those new MOUs with the calculated, updated salary schedule and those COLAs of 5%, that increased all the staff's salaries.
Yeah, sorry, I was asking if you could talk about the relationship between the number of units and the number of covered units and the per unit fee, just that piece of it.
Yeah, so with the salaries increasing
But
and
even
the
if everything
lease,
else stayed the same.
yeah, and the units decreasing, that's going to increase the fees because or even if it stayed, even if the expenditure stayed the same and the units decreased, it requires for us to recoup all those fees that were set. And with less units, we have to charge a higher fee.
Yeah, and if I just can add, and you'll see this in your next meeting, a more robust conversation about this, but this is a cost recovery program. Our budget is a budget of expenditures. And so we calculate all of our costs, we take the unit count, and there's a formula we used, but we essentially divide it amongst the units, depending on whether or not you're fully controlled or partially controlled. So regardless of whether or not your costs increase, if you have less units, it's going to cost the remaining properties more money because it's less cost to spread around to the units. So that's how it works in principle. And,
Great.
And if I can just ask, Mr. Tran, I think there was another, I think it's probably good because it was mentioned in the presentation, maybe you want to speak about fringe benefits and the 54% and what that means and how that's determined.
Yeah, the fringe benefits, that's actually the cost of health insurance, the pension, both current and unfunded liabilities, medical, life, all the costs for staffing a full-time employee. Typically, those actually increase on an annual basis, so we're hoping they don't. But to have the budget and fees projected, we're using what was provided last year unless the city provides us an updated guidance to increase it.
So my understanding is that that 54% number at the bottom of the position control list is saying that, so if somebody's wages, say, are $100,000 a year, then the cost for their fringe benefits is estimated at $54,000.
Correct.
So it's not saying that salaries are 54% of our total budget. It's saying that the cost for fringe benefits is 54% of the cost for salaries.
Correct.
Great. Thank you for clearing that up. So I am just taking a look here at kind of how we're I'm taking a look at the third quarter report to see like how we're doing in terms of financials. And it looks like we're currently under budget when it comes to, oh no, sorry. Yeah, we're currently under budget when it comes to revenues, and we are also under budget when it comes to expenditures, and so it roughly works out. So we're currently at a deficit as of Q3 of about 23,000, but we expect to gain some. Looks like there's some income that hasn't come through yet that we're expecting hopefully in Q4.
Correct. So all those assumptions are correct.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure I was understanding. Okay.
But just to confirm, the expenditures are below budget, and we are at 5 vacancies right now. So that is something to consider for the next meeting, is that
Yeah.
if we were to try to maintain the fees at the same level or even possibly try to lower them, those vacancies would have to be considered as to how to deal with it.
Yeah, because it's not a good operating strategy to use salary savings from vacancies and just keep positions vacant in order to have those savings. It results in the program shrinking and staff becoming increasingly overworked. And so I know we're going to be talking about that later.
Correct.
One of the kind of assumptions that was baked into this presentation is the idea of not filling the deputy director position. And so I wanted to just kind of ask about that. I know that you as deputy director did a lot for the agency, and would love to hear about what you think the impact would be of leaving that position vacant.
Well, it definitely be a strain because it's additional work, but I would prefer it to be vacant to try to keep the fees as low as possible, because to hire for that position, it is one of the higher paid salaries within the program. And if it were to stay vacant and I were to assume, I don't want to assume the role, but I'll assume the work. And the net effect, hopefully that will keep the fees at the lowest possible levels.
Okay. I think when budget options are brought back for consideration, I would like to see one that includes the deputy director position being filled, just to see what that would look like, rather than cutting it out at the beginning.
Okay.
And just for some context, I'm pretty sure this is going to be discussed in more detail at the next meeting, so I won't get into it. But generally, how the budget works, and I think at the last budget, at the last fiscal year, you were all told that adding a new position would lower the fee because it would be a compliance officer and that person would collect revenue. And based on that statement, I believe some of you made public statements you relied on that statement in part to make your decision to approve the position and ultimately approve the budget, with the idea that the fee would be lowered this coming fiscal year. And now you're seeing that that's not the case. And I just want to make sure that you all know and the public knows that this is a cost recovery program. We do not make money. We just pay for our cost. And we do the best, and the board does its best to estimate what those costs will be. And the fee and what you collect should be reflective of your cost. You don't have to be perfect. That's not the goal. It's just, to be close enough. But I want to ensure that you all know that when you add staff on, if that staff is a compliance officer, for instance, and their job is to go out there and make sure landlords are compliant, it costs the program to have that staff member. So that staff member is not saving you fees. They're collecting the fees that you're already owed. So all your money is never going to be a profit. It's going to just make you whole as a program. So That's a context that I believe the executive director is working under. I'm sure you're all working under that, and there'll be a more robust conversation. So I do appreciate, Vice Chair, your suggestion as well, because I think you're kind of cognizant of what's happening. And so, yeah, we can bring back those options or various options for you all to consider.
And as a very high-level preliminary, if we were to put the deputy director budget amount back in, it would increase fully covered units by $23 and partially by $13. So it would get the fully covered to $300 a unit and partially covered to $172 a unit. But this is preliminary.
But I don't think we can get into that because of Brown Act. So we can get into that
Yeah.
conversation at the next
I'd like
meeting.
to discuss it more at the next budget meeting and just see that those numbers included, those options included.
Okay.
Okay, any other, so, the staff are requesting feedback and guidance from the board. So any other feedback or guidance from board members? Okay, then I guess we're just receiving a report and giving informal guidance, so we don't need to make a motion, so we can move on to the next item.
Okay, now we're moving to item I-1 under Rent Board as a whole. Item I-1 is to receive a presentation on current staffing levels and recruitment of adopted Rent Board budgeted positions. This item was continued from the March 18, 2026 regular meeting. There's one speaker on this item.
Great, thank you. We will now hear the staff report.
Good evening, Vice Chair Cantor and members of the Rent Board. I'm Fred Tran, the Executive Director. The item before you, staffing update of the rent program. The statement of issue, it aligns exactly with the prior item of the Muni Code that we do have to discuss staffing on an annual basis. And essentially, the discussion's required because it's such an essential part of the budget. So this is somewhat of a repeat of some of the prior slides, but we will go through the 15 FTEs and the conclusion as to what the next steps should be for us to essentially deal with the vacancies within our program. There is no fiscal impact on this item. The background, early in the program's history, when the program was being established with the city, it actually was incubated from the city manager's office. And at that point, there was actually strong support provided by the city, and hires and the build out of the program was very, very supported. And back then, the policy and procedures to request for staff and initiate recruitment was, I'd say, a lot simpler, where we could potentially just send an email or reach out to HR directly to initiate if the role had been approved by the board, and HR would start facilitating the hiring process once we've identified a candidate. In the last few years, it's been a bit more challenging. It's understandable because I know the city, the state, the economy as a whole, there's definitely a bit more pushback, and there's some areas that are potentially, you hear the word deficits in the economy and cost of living, as well as the just consensus of cost in general increasing. and the city as a whole, with the recruitment efforts, has been delayed. Those prior emails now require a meeting with either HR or city manager, and ultimately to be able to receive or get the recruitment process going to the next level or initiating, a written approval is required from the city manager's office. So that's typically where we are at this delay stage. The 15 head counts have been presented. In yellow highlight are the vacancies. As mentioned, the office assistant as well as the administrative trainees, those were approved in fiscal year 2023, 2024, and they were approved by City Council in that same year in October of 2023. And staff attorney and the rent program service analyst, those were approved by the board in 2025, 2026. And the final vacancy is actually the deputy director role, which is not highlighted in yellow. The recruitment delays, we have gone through all the process with HR as well as meeting with the city manager. We've actually also have met with the finance department to review our budget. And as of now, similar analysis that the vice chair did, where we're aligned with revenues and expenditures, as in we're not over budgeted. So we're hoping to have the recruitments get approved and move forward. But the office assistant, we did actually hire someone in March of 2024, and they had resigned in September 2025, and we had requested to initiate recruitment again and still waiting for that approval. The admin trainee, we had initiated recruitment, and it was actually reclassified because going through the first round of recruitment, we weren't able to identify a candidate, and with that, we reclassified that role. And the final two, the staff attorney and the rep program analyst, we've requested for approval, but we were actually more focused on the first two just to try to initiate the recruitment, and we, in the meantime, still been emailing city managers for approval of the other two. The operational impacts, it actually carries through our entire organization. Our front desk, the intakes, there's gaps because we've been trying our best with the wonderful interns we have, but it's a little bit difficult because they should be focused on school other than work. So we try our best to make sure there's sufficient coverage on a daily basis. As well, the workload with existing staff, with the vacancies, we have the workload. It's just a matter of when current staff can get to what and how to prioritize what. And so it definitely has put a strain on staff, and ultimately it's impacted every unit, the hearings unit, the registrations, our collections, our petitions, and even legal. So for us, it would be helpful to have us be fully staffed. I know Charles, he actually has doubled down for the staff attorney role. So that will be for further discussion next meeting as well. And it definitely will possibly be impacted with the urgency of possible change in policy. So depending on what future votes happen in the next 3 to 6 months, it definitely can add additional workload to the current staff. And this is the conclusion. We did initiate the budget process in the prior item, and we have met with the city manager in early January and requested written approval. At that meeting, they had stated that the roles would be approved, and a follow-up email was sent, and at this point, written approval has not been provided. As mentioned, I did meet with the finance department in mid-January to go over the budget in the mid-budget stage, and we are still awaiting city manager approval. We've requested to meet in the upcoming weeks. I think we're still awaiting to hear back from them as to when we'll meet to get that written approval. And recommended action to receive the presentation on the current staffing levels and recruitment of the adopted rent board budgeted positions.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from members of the board? Okay, I'll save my question for the discussion period. So let's hear public speakers.
Okay, we only have one speaker. We only have one speaker, Cordell Handler. You have 4 minutes to address the board.
Thank you, Secretary Clark Shaw. Oh. It's okay. Can you start my time back? I kind of bobbled. So, for the record, I'm Cordell Henlon. I'm a Richmond resident. So, good evening again, Vice Chair Cantor, board members. Thank you again, Fred, for that presentation. So, as I was looking at this presentation, a couple of things that I was going to address because of staffing levels, because it got me thinking, because it's like the deputy director role has been kind of vacated as of last month. It got me concerned. It's like, you need someone that can, like, carry the workload. If the executive director is not present, the deputy can step in to assume the role when as the acting director until the director returns. So I'm still waiting to hear back from the city manager's office to find out if we can proceed, because this has been a delay for quite some time, and it's like it's getting to the point. So also, because if you remember when Monterey Pines were here last month, you need to get their input, because this is kind of like, especially regarding of housing, you need people like that can help make the transition more easier. So you got to get their input. So I do like the presentation, but I'm kind of hesitant to find out how will this progress, because the interns are wonderful, but my issue is like you need a fully developed staff. So before you proceed with that, you also have to figure out where's the money going to come from. So once the director meets with the city manager next week or in the weeks ahead, whichever comes first, those questions are going to be asked, because right now you need a deputy director for those reasons. So with that, I'll stop.
Thank you.
That was the last and only speaker.
Great. So now's the time for discussion and comments. Board Member Espinosa.
¿Qué es lo que estamos haciendo para que se pueda contratar a estas personas lo más rápido posible?
How can we actually start the process that we're saying right now?
Start the hiring process?
Sí.
Yes.
We typically make a request, and the city manager needs to provide a written approval, and that's what we're waiting on.
Let me interrupt you. Board Member Espinoza, can you repeat the question? Because I want to make sure that the translation was accurate.
Gracias. Bueno, mi pregunta era, ¿qué están haciendo para que las contrataciones sean lo más rápido posible y tengamos al personal
What are
necesario?
we actually doing for the contract to be able to start the process to be able to obtain a new executive director?
No, no dije eso.
That,
Deputy,
¿Lo dices tú?
She's saying what's being done to hire staff as quick as possible.
yeah, to initiate that process, it requires a written approval from the city manager, and that's what we've been requesting from the city.
¿Nosotros no podríamos contratarlo sin la aprobación de la ciudad?
Can we actually contract him without the approval of the city?
It would require board approval in the budget, but
No, the rent ordinance sorry.
Okay. Segundo más.
The rent ordinance requires we follow the city's hiring procedures, so we need the city's approval.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Board Member Height?
Why is the city manager dragging her feet?
that's, we're not certain on that.
I don't want to mischaracterize what the city manager is doing by saying dragging her feet, but we are contacting her, we're staying on top of it, and I'm sure she has a whole city to run, so I'm sure she has a lot going on, but we are definitely staying on top of.
Is there anything we can do?
Potentially, for us, the most important would be for us to meet with her to get the approval. If that doesn't move forward, would probably have an agenda item to request an approval.
Yeah, I'd have to think about it, but everything runs through the city manager at some point, so we're going to have her involvement.
Yeah, I think, I'm wondering, everything runs through the city manager, and the city manager serves at the direction of the city council. And so would it be appropriate to bring this issue to council, whether by putting an agenda item on council, requesting council to direct her to so sorry, what's the word? Approve
yeah, written
the
approval.
hiring processes, or in the form of like us making public comment or talking with electeds one-on-one. Is there any reason not to pursue that option?
Legally, you can do that. There might be, I don't know, relationship reasons or something that's beyond me, but legally, you can certainly do that.
Okay, that's good to know that, yeah, that, because I think that we, have been, we're well aware that there are staffing issues in the program, and that you all have been doing everything in your power to initiate hiring processes. And if there is, if the stalling is coming from the city, then it seems like it makes sense to talk to the people who are the leaders of the city to get this resolved. And that's not to say that the city manager is necessarily doing anything wrong here, but as you mentioned, she has an entire city to run, and the job of city council is to instruct the city manager on how to prioritize. And so I think it would be valuable for us to, and for anyone listening who is interested in getting these positions filled and making sure that we have a fully functioning rent program, to have conversations with our elected officials, or the city manager if you have the ability to meet with her. And hopefully we can since you all are doing everything that you can through official channels, those of us who aren't part of those official processes can take action to try to expedite the issue. Great. Any other? Okay. And then we're receiving another report, so no motions. So let's move on to the next item. And this one has a recommended action.
Yes.
So we're going to get to make a motion.
We're moving to item I2 under Rent Board as a whole. Item I2 is to receive a presentation on the research conducted by the rent program staff on the proposed real estate disclosure policy ordinance as directed by the Rent Board and recommend next steps. This item was continued from the March 18, 2026 regular Rent Board meeting. There are no speakers on this item.
Great. Thank you. We would like to hear the staff report.
Good evening, Vice Chair Cantor and members of the Rent Board. I'm Fred Tran, the Executive Director. And the item before you is I2, research on proposed real estate disclosure. Statement of issue. On the January meeting, we had initially brought the real estate disclosure policy and ordinance. With that, there were discussions, and staff was directed to return after meeting with local title companies to explore collaborative opportunities to ensure the disclosures would occur prior to a property transfer. There is no fiscal impact related to this item. Background, when staff started this process, it initiated from new owners of residential rental housing fees, finding out about their invoice after the purchase of the property. So they were often upset because they were informed by the program, not by the prior owner, or it was that disclosure or fee was not disclosed within their escrow process. Currently, there is no requirement for the seller to disclose those fees being outstanding. And the Rent Board had inquired about possible involvement with title companies. So staff had started the research process, and essentially the discussion was about a preliminary report once the escrow process begins. And with that preliminary report, there's liens, there's taxes, any type of encumbrance that may impact the property. And right now, our fees aren't required to be on there. And that preliminary report and the escrow process, what it's trying to do is provide disclosures of any defects on that title and protect on future any liabilities. So it's there to ensure a smooth transaction, and what we're trying to do is implement a policy to align with that, to get our fees also included or disclosed in some manner. On February 4th, the program staff had met with Caroline Hansen, the escrow operations manager at Old Republic. She has over 33 years of experience, so she's got a wealth of knowledge. As well, Renee Bartels, who actually had spoke during prior meetings. She's a realtor at Caldwell Banker, and she attended the meeting as well. Both were very gracious with their time. They provided us a decent amount of information. And Caroline had mentioned immediately during the meeting, stating that a point of sale ordinance, essentially similar to what we may be recommending, it's not the responsibility of a title company. She stated that that responsibility lies with the buyer, the seller, and the realtor. So a title company is not in any way obligated to disclose those fees. Staff's additional research right now, with that the fees not mandated, we're trying to figure out other avenues to possibly have the fees included in a report. Caroline had recommended recording it in a property tax assessment or put a lien on the property, which is actually also what has been provided and discussed in the past. Renee had recommended that the county develop a noticing process to be recorded for all the properties in the county, which is an option, but would be it'd be very labor intensive, and quite a bit of tracking would be required if all properties were to have that requirement. And they both stated that if this ordinance were to be written properly, it potentially could be beneficial to have our fees included in some way. The laws that basically requires for these records to be added to the county, it is recording, and the consideration for recording will actually require additional staff time. We'd have to coordinate with the county, and I'd actually reached out to them on fees. They actually stated that the fees, they can't determine the fees until the recording happens. So actually, that's also an additional amount of work that might be required. And necessary for each title company to contact each buyer seller. The details for that, it would require some staff outreach, education, and the title companies, there are a significant amount of title companies, so to identify one title company to administer all these transactions would be very difficult. So it ultimately does come down to recording with the county. And other considerations are the time it would take to do the recording and process with the county and the recorder's office. Right now, what we're trying to do is figure out the most efficient way. The lien definitely is an option. That is going to require coordination with both county and the city, because the city does have a lien process in place. So we would need to align with the city's processes to be able to have our fees included in their lien procedures. Considerations from staff to try to coordinate with all title companies. That may not be viable just because there's so many out there, and we can't dictate which title company needs to be used in a transaction. Typically the buyer would decide, or whoever's paying the title insurance would dictate which title company is chosen. So we would have to identify that title company, so there is some difficulty in that process. And the disclosure fees and restrictions, since they're not since title companies are not required to, they may not prioritize that process. So at this point, recording directly with the county is more likely the best way to proceed. And one last item. During the January meeting, the vice chair did state that our written, how we structure this, it doesn't need to be exclusive. We can do a mutual process, as in proposed real estate disclosure ordinance, as if we craft the language properly, and also move forward with the proposed lien ordinance that had been presented in October. That may be the best option, and staff feels that that's the best avenue to pursue. And the recommended action is receive the presentation on the research conducted by the rent program staff on the proposed real estate disclosure policy and ordinance as directed by the rent board, and recommend the next steps.
Great, thank you so much. Do we have any questions from members of the board? So I just want to be clear, or sorry, Board Member Height, did you have any questions? Okay. I just want to be clear on sort of the recommendation. So it sounds like kind of the recommendation is to pursue both recording fees with the county and then also moving forward with the lien ordinance?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, do we have any public speakers?
No speakers on this item.
Okay, great. Any other comments, discussion from the board? Okay, then I can make a motion to recommend that staff move forward with crafting the, with implementing the proposed, or sorry, move forward with the proposed real estate disclosure ordinance and recording fees with the county, and simultaneously move forward with the proposed lien ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Vice Chair Cantor and a second by Board Member Height. I'll take a vote. Board Member Espinoza,
Yes.
Board Member Height,
Yes.
Vice Chair Cantor.
Yes.
Motion passes with Board Member Willis and Chair Tipton absent. The next item on the agenda is reports of officers.
Reports of officers, it goes back to the budget item. So please check your emails, because we'll be polling on availability for April 29th, May 3rd, and hopefully we'll be able to have an adopted budget to the council by June.
Great. Thank you. Any reports from board members? All
Do you
right.
have something? That's it?
Meeting adjourned at 6:40 p.m. Good job, team. We got through that fast.
We haven't had
Thank
that in
you.
a while.
I thought we were going to be here till like 8:30.
So 6:40, thank you.